All right, so here we are going with our first test episode for Brands Freshly Roasted. I'm Chris, and this is Avi. Avi, is it okay if we use Avi versus Aviral? Is that all right? Or what
Yeah,
do you
Aviral
prefer?
is great. You're pronouncing my name
Aviral.
right now.
Let's
Yeah,
go
that's awesome.
Aviral.
Yeah.
Okay, Chris and Aviral. All right, and so we've done some research. We've looked for some examples of what we call a story gap. I'll start by just sort of talking a little bit about what a story gap is. So we've developed a methodology called Storyline that is all about delivering a clear and compelling narrative that connects the unique value proposition of a brand with the group of people that are most likely to benefit from what that brand has to offer. And ultimately, there's a lot of cognitive science and psychology and storytelling science behind all of it. But what's it called when the storyline is broken, when it's not directly connecting with the audience, when it's not resonating emotionally, and therefore the business is not growing as a result of the story? We call that a story gap. And this is basically a disconnect or a misalignment between the brand's narrative and the audience's journey, desires, or expectations. And so when a brand fails to create that cohesive, compelling, consistent storyline that resonates with the audience, it creates a gap in understanding, emotional connection, and ultimately effectiveness. And so Avril and I have done a little bit of research, and we've looked to find what are some examples of this in the marketplace. And we've looked at big brands and small brands and startups that crashed and burned literally because of their story gaps. And so now we're just kind of going back and forth trying to figure out what's the right lens for the conversation today and maybe in general with these episodes. One idea was to pursue a category and then come up with examples of the category, like cars. You want to say a little bit about that, Avro?
Yeah, sure. So I was thinking that we can actually talk about cars as a whole category, wherein we can talk about Rolls-Royce actually presenting themselves in the airplane shows and not presenting themselves in the automobile dealerships, talking about Lamborghinis because they don't do TV commercials, talking about Jaguar. Everyone is talking about and going gaga about the new Jaguar logo that they have designed in November 2024. And then I don't know. I don't know. It's just very confusing because the new car has actually broken the internet with all the impressions and everything. And then the old Jaguars are merely at $50,000. Like I used to drive one, so not flexing it, but then it was fine. I like the Jaguar. Now it's just a Jaguar, so not sure. What are your thoughts on the Jaguar new logo? Like coming from your experience, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's certainly got a lot of attention. There's no question about that. And it was interesting to hear people deep in, my industry, sort of branding, brand strategy, messaging. And there was a real divide. I was almost felt like half and half. There was about half of the people that said, "Oh my God, what a disaster. Like, can't believe they did this. Doesn't make any sense. Did they even check in with their audience first?" And the other half were like, "This is genius." And the genius people were saying essentially that, look, from a business standpoint, Jaguar was looking to raise their price point significantly. And in fact, they're doubling the entry point for price point. So it used to be roughly 50 to 60K would be an entry level Jaguar. And now it's 100 to 120K just to get in to a new Jaguar, one of these new ones. And going all electric, another big, is that a disconnect? Is that the right thing? There's a hot debate. But considering that the increase in price point is has such a big impact on, way beyond the look and feel of the brand or the story, even to be fair, ultimately, nobody's going to buy a Jaguar if they don't have that, 100, 120, 150, 200K, available. And so it was interesting. I found a quote from the Jaguar executives. Essentially, they were saying that they acknowledge that they expect only 10 to 15% of current Jaguar customers or fans even to follow them to the new brand positioning. And so, one
Isn't
more
that
aspect of,
wild? Don't you think it's
yeah,
wild? Like you made
right.
all of this connection and all of these fan following for like your whole life, and now you just want to get rid of 85% of these people? I don't know if that's the right move.
Yeah. I think I have to agree. There's a storytelling element that I'd like to focus on just for a second, which is related to a story gap. So the rebrand doesn't really explain the why behind the transformation, and it failed to create a narrative that connected past, present, and future in a meaningful way. And so I think that's a big part of why they can't bring a larger percentage of their audience along with them on this transformation, because they kind of just neglected them. They were kind of like, sorry, we're moving on. And that's never a good idea. I mean, for the business, like why cut off all of that potential, even just the affinity, right? Just the people who love the brand. Why do you want to box them out? Like it's an exclusive kind of, attitude and positioning. And certainly that's built into the Jaguar brand already, but it just feels like a missed opportunity to not incorporate that past, present, future into the narrative, to at least give people the opportunity to feel included in the future of Jaguar and the brand.
The brand trust actually went down. So I had a 2023 Jaguar and I was about to upgrade it to the facelift model 2024 in 2025 because I was getting a massive discount. But I felt, I don't know, maybe this car just they don't service my car. I don't know, So being a valuable, loyal customer with them, it just hurts. I don't know, but I have now booked the Tesla, so I'm going to be with Elon. So no more discussions on the Tesla part, but let's see where it goes. But then,
I mean, you brought it up. I'll just say Tesla wise, I mean, they have literally survived and thrived on the strength of their brand alone. Now, the product, arguably, especially in the early years and mid stage, like everybody loves it. But now what's happening is, for lots of reasons we won't get into, there's been a supercharged kind of scrutiny on the product itself, in addition to the brand. And these videos are going viral. Not only are people burning their Teslas, that's probably politically motivated, but these videos of people showing, like, here's the way this thing is peeling off because the glue wasn't strong enough, or here's the way that it rattles when I'm driving down the road and it's just recently been serviced. So, the quality of the product, it feels like, I think this is a situation where it's a lack of innovation. They haven't rolled out any new models in a long time, and that's essential for a car brand. You have to put out fresh sheet metal, as they say, and keep your audience excited to keep driving sales. And they've been sort of I don't know, I'm forgetting the best way to say it, but essentially just sort of crawling along based on the strength of their brand. They're not really sort of proactively, confidently charging forward on the strength of new innovation. So Tesla is a really interesting case. Very strong brand, but a brand in trouble, no doubt. And their sales have been sinking all year.
And the last time I raised my eyebrows for Tesla was when they launched the Cybertruck, to be honest.
Right.
And next is when my friend Will got it wrapped in black color, matte black color. So that's all. There's nothing else left for Tesla. But do you want to talk about how they have zero marketing budget and they keep throwing these crazy horns wherein, you can honk in a farted manner or whatever, you can do some crazy weird stuff with this car. Don't you think that's crazy?
Sure. Yeah, crazy and interesting. And I think it goes to, it's an interesting connection to what seems like the future of the company and the vision now, which is, it's not even a car company, it's a technology company, it's a software company. That's what he's trying to make. He's combining the XAI with Tesla, with X itself, and it seems like he's just going to sort of streamline and dovetail all of those things together for lots of other reasons, but essentially that it's a software company. And to your point, the different honks, these are software updates, right? These are things that they can do over the air, that have very low cost in terms of distribution, right, or production. It's not stamping sheet metal and installing all kinds of parts and making sure it's perfect because it has to be safe enough to drive on the road. It's just a software update. So I think that that might be part of the problem and a big part of the appeal at the same time.
Yeah, maybe the marketing person at Tesla deserves a raise and a branding person needs to be changed.
Yeah, I might go with that. Yeah, I might agree. So Let's see what else. Anything else in the car space? I did come across an example of Volkswagen. They pulled an April Fool's prank. I don't have the year here, but it was maybe a couple of years ago, not too long ago. But they announced they were changing the name to Volkswagen, as in volts, as in electricity, to reflect their commitment to electric vehicles. Then they revealed it was an April Fool's joke, but this created a story gap between their attempt at humor and the public's expectations for corporate communications. They didn't put it out as a clever, ad campaign. It was this sort of like press release type approach. And so they had already had previous emission scandals, and they were already in the process of trying to rebuild trust. And it was just a really bad choice with the timing, with the previous circumstances. And so a storyline approach would have recognized the journey of the audience regarding trust with the brand following the emissions scandal, and that would have sought to understand that position as a guide helping customers transition to electric vehicles. They could have used that to create authentic messaging that built credibility instead of choosing to undermine it with confusing humor. To be clear, they chose the confusing humor. They didn't choose to undermine it, but the undermining was a direct consequence of the confusing humor. So that feels like a story gap fail there for Volkswagen.
You're so right. Like, story gap is major reason why a lot of brands fail. Like Volkswagen's legal and branding team and the C-suite team, if they would have been in sync with the marketing team, this wouldn't have been the case. Maybe it's just like, this is what might have happened in the office. Like the marketing guy like me would have been excited that, oh my God, April Fool Day is coming. Last year I saw this, I should launch this. And then I got an approval from my boss and we just launched it. And that, I don't know what to say, but that bad things happen. So talking about that, I think the story gap. Maybe we want to talk about the storyline and the story gap here. Do you want to explain people about what do you think about the story gap and how can it be? How can we make sure that there's less? The delta of the gap is so low that we don't occur these mistakes. We don't do those problems.
Sure. Yeah. I'm gonna. All right. So, I mean, it's a great question. Essentially, we've defined the gap pretty well, and the high level of what a storyline really is. I think one of the sort of core theses is around the idea that content is everywhere. It's so easy to generate content at scale now, especially with AI in the mix. And, a term of art that's becoming quite popular is AI slop. The internet is already just overwhelmed and flooded with this AI generated slop. It's like marginally decent content. It's not filled with typos or grammatical errors. If you read it once, not very carefully, it sounds pretty okay. But if you really, apply any kind of critical thinking to what the message actually is, it kind of just falls apart. It's just, muddled and mediocre. And so building on this, what's clear and true and what we know about just innately as humans is that stories are what get attention. Even going all the way back to the cave paintings, on the wall, it's a way that humans have always not only captured information, but transferred information and carried information through their lives over time. And, stories spread. And storylines, arguably, are what drive growth. And so, a storyline is essentially the bridge between your valuable offering and the people who need it most. A storyline translates complex value into clear, compelling communication that resonates deeply with exactly who you're trying to reach. And so there's a clear business outcome here, which is really what the focus should always be. And so essentially, when your communication authentically connects value to need, then growth follows naturally. And so it's not about temporary spikes from ads or promotions or some one-off clever campaign. This is about sustainable growth that's built on genuine resonance between what you provide and who needs it most. So this is what we do at Storyline.
Do you think the storyline keeps changing? So I'll give you a very specific use case and maybe you can tell me that I've seen a founder at pre-seed doing 500,000 in ARR. I've seen the same founder doing 2 million in ARR, and now I see the same founder doing 10 million in ARR. Do you think the storyline changes across these segments, or do you think it's the same forever?
Well, I mean, I wonder if the founder you mentioned on the lower end of the ARR scale could actually be at the higher end if they had a storyline. In other words, I might argue that the reason their ARR is limited or stuck where it is because they've got story gaps. There's that story is not effectively resonating and connecting with the people who stand to benefit. This is such an important point. So, you're a founder and you've created this very special thing, right? It's kind of like your baby. And of course, you believe in it and you love it and you trust it and you think it's infinitely valuable. And hopefully you've done the due diligence to make sure that you got product market fit, right? So it's not just you that loves that product, but there's a large addressable market, a big TAM that's going to really appreciate and want and need this thing that you've built and put out into the world. But something has to connect those two things. And that's the story. It's literally the only way to connect those two things. There has to be a piece of language that conveys the value that is waiting to be grabbed to the people that are most likely to, gain value from that offering. And so it really is that simple. And I think I would probably argue that this is a common problem, and maybe even a trap, you might say, that a founder falls into, which is that it's essentially being too close to the product and that love and adoration that I mentioned because you've created this thing, right? Of course, you have really strong feelings about it. And of course, you could also be a little bit blinded to, is it easily understandable? Is it easy to grasp the complexity that to you as the founder is just so clear and obvious? Probably not. And even if you have a technical audience, you can't assume that they're going to immediately have that grasp of the value of what you've created. There's no reason to rely on them to do that. All it takes is just crafting the story that tells it appropriately.
Yeah, there's one quick fact that I want to talk about. So I actually lost $200 on this bet. So there was this guy at the gym I met, and he's like, "What do you do?" And I told him that we work for branding and we do this and that. And he's like, "Do you know what the Voynich manuscript is?" And I was like, "No." He said, "I'll bet you $200 if you can give me the explanation of that manuscript." So I was like, what can I not find on ChatGPT? I went to the internet, found Voynich manuscript, took a screenshot, put it to ChatGPT. ChatGPT told us that this is the only manuscript in the world that couldn't be described. So we found that, and I lost $200 on that day, but it's crazy. There's a full book, there's a full thesis written in that manuscript, but no one in this world till now has been able to figure out that manuscript. And this is the truth. I'll show it to you later after this thing, but
please do. Yeah.
It's insane. I lost $200 that day, so it's funny.
Wow.
Yeah, so my question again, maybe let's just talk about this thing one more time, because this is very, very crucial when it comes to founders, and they think that they have a team of branding, marketing, sales, and everything, and now they're set for life. But then there is an outside counsel, there is an outside agency, there is an outside person who's required to actually tell them that the story is ready to be changed. When I am working with my bootstrap money and scaling this business to 500K, my story to my customers is, this is my hard-earned money and I'm here to solve your pain. And then maybe from 500K to 2 million, my journey is like, look, A, B, and C trust me, and that's why I'm doing this for you now. And maybe after 2 million or 5 million, I have a user base of 500 enterprise customers, and now I want to scale to 10. So my question again is, do you think that my story is changing across these milestones, or do you think it's the same story that stays for the clients till the end?
I see. Yeah, that's another great question, and it's slightly different form. I may have misunderstood the first time. So
you answered
does
me
the
right
story
on the
change?
first time as well. You answered me right on the first time as well. Because we spoke about it, I asked this question again, because this is the next question, these founders might have.
Got it. So does the story change as you move through key milestones in your growth journey? I would say absolutely. And the key is that when a storyline is done well from the start, then it becomes a bit of a spine for the narrative journey. And so it's not that you necessarily I don't know if that spine metaphor is going to hold up, but it's not necessarily that you're ever going to change your spine, but you're certainly going to create new appendages from that spine to reflect the state of your business and your product as you move through that journey. That word journey is so overused, but there's a path, right, that you're following as you grow, a trajectory, if you will. Hopefully it's going like this. up and to the right. And so, the story needs to evolve. It has to, but I think it might be more important that the story evolves with your audience than with your product. And actually, as I say that, it's both, right? You have to do two things. One, you have to always be revisiting your narrative, your storyline, and make sure that it accurately reflects the current state of your offering. And I like to always add in a little bit of room to grow. So any good storyline doesn't just speak to exactly what the current circumstance is. It leaves a little room. It paints a little picture of what the near and midterm future might look like. So it's not overpromising. It's certainly not being inauthentic or dishonest. But it is sort of aspirational in a way, and it allows not only your team internally and your product team to aspire to something bigger than where you are now, but it gives your audience a place to sort of think about as a future with your company, with your product, with your offering. And then on the audience side, they're changing always, right? Their preferences and tastes are evolving. There might be other adjacent products or offerings that are coming into the market and trying to steal their attention. So you have to stay top of mind and make sure that you're always understanding meet them where they are. You have to understand what's going on with your audience at all times. And that's of course part of the process.
Yeah, you answered my question rightly. Now, there's this one very controversial thing that the whole Bay Area is talking about, and I think we should definitely highlight this. And this part of this Riverside will go everywhere. I can promise you this thing. There were a couple of founders at this community dinner last week. We all were together. There's this young kid, 15 years old, running a community of founders, 2,500 founders in his community all over A cities. The topic of the discussion, where everyone just had super different opinions, was personal brand. I, as a founder of a company that's A series, or I, as a company of a founder who's B series, or whatever, I'm a founder, I run a business, and it's a legitimate business doing revenue with like 5 or 10 people in my company at least. Personal brand is a topic of discussion. Like, what do you think? People are saying that personal brand is the new corporate brand. People are saying you don't need to put money in your company, but you need to put money in the personal brands. Hockey Stack is doing a great job by promoting the personal brands. Their entire marketing team budget goes in building the personal brand. There are so many more companies coming in the Bay Area who are just investing so much money in the personal brand, and they have zero posts on their LinkedIn's company page. What are your thoughts on this? Will you buy a service from me if my personal brand is strong, versus will you buy a service from me if my business brand is strong?
Yeah, this is a really important topic. This is one of those ones where I'm reminded that I'm just so deep in this stuff, and the average person just isn't. So what I mean by that is, I was aware of this sort of pivot in the trend lines maybe 18, 24 months ago. It was essentially the idea that it originated from LinkedIn mostly, which is that, hey, look at what's going on performance on LinkedIn. Brand content from brand profiles is downward sliding, and all the content coming from individual people, from personal brand profiles, if you will, is taking off. And then I heard it validated by one of the people in this space that I respect and admire the most, who's Scott Galloway. Many people in the audience may have heard of him. He's all over the place. He's writing books. He's got multiple, massive top 10 in the world podcasts. He teaches marketing at a graduate school, Stern School of Business, I believe, off the top of my head. And doing some really important work around the crisis of young men and boys in America in particular, which I relate to a lot. But he pointed that out probably 18 months or so ago is when I heard him say it, which is essentially what you're saying, that personal brands are the way of the future. One way to think about this is, do you buy from a faceless entity or do you buy from a person? And ultimately, we buy from people. I mean, if you think all the way down to the retail level, right? You are literally, you're walking to I don't know, CVS is your drugstore that's closest to your home, but ultimately you're buying your toothpaste and your cotton balls from a person at a register, right? So that's a very tactical example that doesn't exactly tie to what we're saying, but ultimately we're people, we buy from people. And so I think there is an important sort of combination that has to happen. I mean, what we're doing at Brand Multiplier is, it's founder-led marketing is the term of art that seems to have taken over. That's the way that a lot of founder-led marketing, a lot of businesses that's their strategy, and they're seeing tremendous growth from that. Adam Robinson is a big name in this space. Sort of became like the guy on LinkedIn, and he talked about how he did it. And actually, I saw he just they just got I think a $10 million funding round for his recent company RB2B, and then he exited. And so founder-led marketing, I think, is definitely the way of the future. The way we're doing it is, I'm putting myself out there more and more so as we move forward as the founder of Brand Multiplier, and then our company page is essentially just reposting what I put out. So there is a bit of a synchrony there. Both the personal brand and the corporate brand have a role to play. And I think what's interesting is finding the right strategy and striking the right balance there. One more quick example is essentially that, would you put out if you're a mid-market company and you're somehow going to do broadcast for some reason, some kind of TV campaign, do you put the founder on camera? That's arguable. Not sure. It really depends on the circumstances of the product, the offering, the audience, the market conditions, the competitive set, all of that. But I think there's an interesting role for each of those to play in the mix.
Awesome. Nice. This just makes me want to ask you a lot of more questions around this because
Aviral, what do you think about that? You're in the startup space. Tons of founders. You're a founder yourself. What's your take?
Founder-led marketing. I really like this term because I did not use this ever in my life. But then, yes, I actually was making a note like founder-led marketing. That's a nice term. But then, talking about building personal brands over business brands, I think I am now, because of this internet and because of ChatGPT and so much content just floating around for free, I am genuinely interested in the person I work with rather than his experiences in the past. You can be the founder of a multi-billion-dollar company, but then you could be a person I don't want to work with, right? I don't want to use those words right now, but then maybe in the third or the fourth podcast we can use that. But coming back to it, I think I don't want to work with a person who has a lot of medals on him. I want to work with a person who seems to be comfortable to work with, I was actually juggling between Motion app, Monday.com, ClickUp, and all these things. But then I went for Motion. And now, because we are talking about it, I think it's because of their marketing that I chose Motion. Second thing is because they had this AI bubble around them, which Monday and ClickUp and all these productivity tools couldn't gain yet. I think this is why, I chose Motion, and I think founder-led marketing is the way to go. Like, you should be putting your content in a way that people feel comfortable to talk to you, because there are so many AI-driven brands. There's so much content. You cannot just trust anyone and everyone, and you don't want to get into a trap. So maybe I think founder-led marketing is something, and maybe 5% of the whole company budget should go in. Whole company budget, as in, let's say if a company has raised $10 million, I'm talking about 5% of $10 million going in branding and marketing of the front row, maybe the whole of the C-suite executives. This is what Hockey Stack is doing, and I'm a fan of these guys.
Yeah, I think that's really smart. If you have a founding team, then each of those people should be doing their own personal brand. And there's really no reason not to do it. Another idea was sparked by what you're saying, which is around vulnerability and this idea of building in public. I think another distinction between the old world and the new world, if you will, is that it really, when I was growing up, everything was so hyper polished. Like everything was just so polished and perfect when it came to branding and marketing. I worked for Disney and Hard Rock and, Google, Microsoft, like everything was just dialed in and, I'm just going to say it again, extremely polished and a little bit sort of artificial, really, ultimately, in hindsight. And we've pivoted now as a culture, it feels like, to where we're sick of that. And now what we want is authenticity. We want
Yeah.
genuine truth. And what does that really mean? That means being vulnerable. That means being willing to fail, being willing to fail in public, being able to almost literally fall down and bust your nose on the street and get up with the bloody nose and tell the story about it.
Yeah.
That's what people want. That's what people connect to. And who knows, maybe 10, 15 years ago, that the pendulum will swing back again and we go back to the hyper polished everything. Who knows? But certainly for the next, 5, 10 years, it feels like we're on this vulnerability track, build in public, just be honest, be authentic. And I have to say that I don't think authenticity will ever go away in terms of its salience and importance for just humans in general.
Yeah. More than build in public, it's famous because it's fail in public. I was following this founder for a long time who actually raised like $2 million and said that this world is a lonely place and I want to build an app where people can talk about. And this guy is having a company called The Last Day, and this guy talks about what if it was my last day, and he talks about how he just has 20,000 days left in his life and 500 weeks. And this guy actually puts on a list of 100 things he want to do before he dies, and he talks about all the crazy weird stuff that he want to go naked in a pool, and he want to do some crazy stuff. And people actually started looking at him that, wow, this guy is being vulnerable about it, that okay, these are the 100 things that he wants to do, and he knows that he's about to die. So he builds an app for everyone in this world wherein people can share what they want to do in their life before they die, and on the basis of that they can actually meet and do that stuff together. And this app failed miserably because people like to talk a lot and they don't like to execute. But now apparently this guy came on Twitter again, and then he talks about, and I've been following all of this, and then he comes on Twitter and talks about, you know what? I had an honest conversation with myself in the morning. And being a man, it's hard to live in this world where I am just 3 months away to lose all my cash. I raised 2 million and I still have some cash that will last just for 3 months. So the honest conversation just brought me to these final pointers, that the first thing is I don't need a tech heavy business because I don't have money to give to developers. Second thing is I still want to do something that actually makes people do some things that actually eradicates their loneliness from them. Third thing is, because of all this AI and all this bubble of tech, people are getting more lonely, relationships are tough, people are getting divorced. So I want to build something real for these guys. And I will do anything and everything to make this successful. This guy starts bringing in three men and three women together on a strange date, and you cannot see my face till I come on the date. And just imagine, these dates, he has been hosting these dates and it has become successful, but then he was actually hosting them himself. Now he scaled it, and now this company is doing $10 million in ARR in 10 months. So all I am saying is I really love the way the founders come outside and talk about how vulnerable they are, how they don't have any runways, how they are failing, how they are miserable, and then build something on the top of it. I think out of the 10 million ARR, 2 million in ARR was driven because he's vulnerable. What do you think about this thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so let's break it down. Why is that? I mean, it's obviously true. Why is it? I mean, relatability comes to mind, right? Again, I'm reflecting on my childhood and adolescence growing up and, seeing people on TV. This was before influencers and social media and all of that. And, they were these sort of untouchable, perfect,
Yeah.
people on the screen, right? And you, in some way, in some cases, certain characters, you could go like, oh, I'd love to be like them someday, that particular character that for whatever reason resonates with you, but it still felt kind of unattainable. It was, because they're, these are scripted personalities that are not real. And, now fast forward to where we are now, and to your point, relatability, right? You see the founder talking about his struggles, and his successes, and it feels attainable. Oh, if I have the right idea and I pour everything I have into it, I've got a shot at this. I may not make $1 million. I may not make $10 million. I may not scale to $1 billion or, a billion users. But I could try. And I think because the failure is out in the open, it puts a more sort of realistic lens on the whole thing. And again, authenticity, right? So being able to see yourself in someone else's story is really a big part of the heart of the storyline methodology itself. You have to be able to find a way so that the audience whom you're speaking to, who you first deeply understand, right? Know your audience. You're speaking to them with a story in a way that connects to their heart, lights up their mind, but gives them a way to see themselves as the hero in the story of that brand. That is key. And that's, Joseph Campbell, that's the hero's journey. There's 100 varieties and examples of that framework and methodology, but ultimately you could connect that to almost certainly any top 10 box office success in the past 50 years has some version of a hero's journey. This is ultimately what we're talking about. Back to your point, the founder is the hero in that journey, and conceivably someone in the audience could see themselves as the hero of their own journey that's similar to the one that they're watching.
Wow. Yeah. The way you have put it is so good. Like now I understood what I said. So
Thanks. Appreciate that.
yeah, this is
I
awesome.
wonder,
Yeah.
should we look back at some of those other examples that we dug up and just see what comes out?
Yeah.
I think we both resonated with the Balenciaga example, right?
Yeah. Let's
So,
talk about that. Let me just pull it
so
up quickly. Yeah.
yeah.
Mm,
So just for the audience's benefit, in 2022, Balenciaga, the well-known luxury fashion brand, rolled out an ad campaign that featured children holding teddy bears, and they were dressed in bondage gear. And essentially, the gap here was a profound disconnect between the luxury brand's artistic expression and societal values regarding child safety. And so, how did that gap impact the business? Well, it definitely did. Specifically, they lost approximately 100,000 Instagram followers, like overnight. They were removed from List Index's top 10 brands, and they had a significant sales decline. So,
yeah.
real impact to the business and their brand.
Funny enough, people in India, I'm an Indian, and then people in India who were like big celebrities actually came on screen and they were like, stop wearing Balenciagas. This was a campaign. And crazy enough, I also saw these Illuminati guys who tend to talk about Illuminati and they connect the old worlds and the new worlds, talking about how Balenciaga is a brand from Illuminati and why Balenciaga is the name and why do they have these small teddy bears and bondages and everything. And just went wild that,
Mm,
this brand is from the Illuminati. And a lot of people had a negative connotation, even like when you go to Woodsbury Common, it's like a cheap store in New Jersey where you get a lot of fashion brands, expensive fashion brands on a discount, 60-70% discount. You will
mm,
see a line outside every store, but not Balenciaga. And I used to go to that store before that thing happened, and we used to have a line for 2 hours. It was a
mm.
70% off discount. You guys can find Woodsbury Common, go to New Jersey and New York and shop your stuff there. This is not an endorsement, but just letting you know. Then yeah,
Nice.
Balenciaga actually got a very big hit because of that campaign.
Yeah, totally. And so I think it's interesting maybe to look at that example and think a little bit about what would a proper storyline approach maybe have done. And so I think first we would have identified the emotional values of the target audience. So I think pretty quickly we would have found that across the entire audience, people care about child safety. Like people love children. They want to protect children, even if they don't have children. It's just sort of a natural human instinct. And so through that understanding of the customer's journey, their values around family and children, we still could have found a way to push some boundaries with the creative while still maintaining resonance with the audience's core values instead of violating their core values, which is exactly what happened
Yeah,
here. They pushed the boundary with the creative, and in turn, they violated core values of their audience.
yeah.
And we could see real impact when you do something like that.
I might be completely wrong, but if I were the branding head of or marketing head of Balenciaga, and if I had this budget, that the budget that was used to launch this campaign, I would have
Mm,
launched a campaign wherein maybe there are smart kids, small kids, young kids wearing Balenciaga puff jackets and looking cool in their streetwear. maybe this would have increased in sales because parents would have gone there to buy stuff for their kids and they would have bought it for themselves or the kids. But
Yeah.
yeah, rather than those teddy bears, maybe something more cool, more fashionable, which pushes the kids and the child towards fashion would have been more promoting. What are your thoughts on this? I might be wrong. You're the hero
Yeah.
here.
No, I'm no hero.
Volkswagen.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that where you're coming from. I'm the type of person where I would never want to speculate on creative because it's kind of it's just uh, it's just at the heart of what I've learned in terms of what I do. Like you have to do the due diligence before you understand what the creative can be. To put it a different way, in the context of creativity, often parameters or constrictions or containers are really helpful in helping creativity to flower. When it's just a wide open landscape and you could produce anything you want, it tends to get a little loose. It's hard to focus. But in this example, if we knew that, okay, anything related to child safety is off the table, I mean, that sort of narrows the lane a little bit. I think the idea of putting kids in inherently adult situations, like that's an idea that potentially has some legs because it grabs attention, right? It's unexpected. But then how you execute on that is so important. And so, if you had a kid as, in an executive environment, or some other inherently adult environment where the kid being there is automatically like, whoa, what's going on? Okay, that's an attention grabber. But then you got to think it all the way through. What are the layers of meaning going on? I mean, does that even make sense? That example I just gave, putting a kid, as in a Balenciaga suit, maybe behind a big desk in a skyscraper office. I mean, it seems funny when you picture it, but is that really going to help sell Balenciaga? Does that connect with their audience? I don't know, and I wouldn't know unless I had the opportunity to do the proper due diligence. It does remind me of the other example, one of the other examples we had around Bud Light, in terms of an inherent disconnect with the values of the core audience. They did a collaboration with a transgender influencer named Dylan Mulvaney, and it created a huge story gap with a significant portion of their traditional customer base. They had good intentions. They were trying to embrace inclusivity, right? But they failed to bridge the narrative between the established identity of Bud Light and this new direction. Right, it was similar to the Jaguar example, right? You got to have past, present, and future, and have some connective tissue there.
Yeah,
There's got to be a bridge
I
if you're
agree.
going to make some shift in the direction. It has to be a bridge, and of course, again, direct impact to the business. There were huge boycotts, and literally they reported a $15.7 billion loss in market value, all from this story gap, which really was resulting from insufficient groundwork to prepare that core audience for the shift in brand positioning. The last thing I'll say on this, and I want to hear from you, Aviral, is if they would have done that due diligence first and then figured out a way to roll out the campaign in a way that brought the core audience along, they would have been more successful, no doubt. Now, that said, this is a really hard sort of set of dots to connect. The traditional Bud Light audience, everybody has a picture in their mind of what that is, and that's pretty true. Regardless of how that looks in your head, we all know basically what that looks like. And then you throw transgender in the mix, and that's a really hard, set of things to connect where nobody feels left out. So I might argue that this was a bridge too far, a mountain too high, however you want to say it. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think the appetite of the consumer to understand a marketing campaign and the attention span of the consumer towards content is directly proportional.
Hmm.
It's super low. If you send me a new creative from your brand, whatever I'm thinking since morning, my mindset keeps changing. My perspective keeps changing. I didn't get my favorite parking spot. I'm unhappy. My attention span is now 20% less. I
Hmm.
didn't find my overnight oats in the refrigerator. My attention span is 20% lesser than the 20% I already lost. I'm
Hmm.
now at 60%. Now my boss calls me and asks me, "What did you do yesterday?" Like, how dare him ask me that question? Now it's just 10%. Now I see your ad. A Bud Light getting promoted by a transgender. Come on. Are you playing with me right now? All
Right.
I'm trying to say is it's just crazy. So the attention span is small, people are fragile, your consumer doesn't have time. They just want to be on the fly. They just want to be they just want to resonate with their values and your values. So you need to be super
Mm,
careful. And I really like the way you have explained this thing, that there has to be a past narrative, a present narrative, and a future narrative to every campaign that you launch. And in
mm,
fact, if you have more than one follower of your brand, you need to be super careful, because people actually tend to follow brands. Also, to make it more educational, this Riverside thing that we are doing, also to make it more educational, I'm a big believer of Lux Surface Area. I'm a very big believer of Lux Surface Area, that earlier it was just the brand that could market themselves. And then the Lux Surface Area used to increase by putting in more budgets, more partnerships around that brand.
mm,
Now, if you have a team of 20 people in your company, every 20 people, all the 20 people can have their own personal brands, and they can talk about your company, your offerings in their own swift way. If I'm a GTM guy, I'm working with a company called X, I should be talking about GTM things that are working for X in a generic way, that other GTM guys whom I'm friends with on my platform should be like, wow, this guy is crazy. Now, this guy is crazy, but at the end of the day, this guy is associated with that company X. All I'm trying to say is 20 people in the company, and there is this company which was actually launched. I am actually very bad at the names, but it's called People or something, backed by Y Combinator, scale raised 4.3 million in funding. It happened 2 months back. And these guys actually came up with the idea wherein, let's say, if there is a company X and there are 20 employees, these 20 employees might be mutual connections of your prospects. So you don't have to just,
mm.
be bullish about the sales reps that you have, but maybe your branding guy can get you the first 5 enterprise clients. So all I'm trying to say is Lux Surface Area has to be increased. The storyline, the story gap, actually, all of this works parallel to how can we actually market ourselves well. But then you just cannot just market yourself in any way. There has to be a structure, and that is where expertise come in.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. A couple of things in there I love so much. I mean, first, just really sharp take on the whole thing, but within that, this your example of the 20 people, right? So, the way to execute on that is essentially you've got the central storyline established for the brand. You've done the due diligence, and you know that that storyline is super solid. It's super authentic. It's super resonant with the people who, again, stand to benefit the most from what you have to offer. And now building from that, now you run that through the lens of these individual sets of experience and point of view and authentic life experience, right? So you've got Joe in GTM, and he's taking that core storyline and he's running it through the lens of what's important to him and what he's focused on. And of course, it speaks back to the brand. You're speaking the language of the brand, based on the brand playbook. The storyline is engineered to be flexible, but also sort of solid, right? And cohesive. Cohesive is the word that comes to mind when you're talking about some of those examples, is that that storyline has to be cohesive and consistent across all of the touch points, regardless of who's delivering it, regardless of the platform where it's being heard or experienced. It has to be consistent and coherent and cohesive. And so I just love this idea. Back to authenticity, you can have lots of messengers, but as long as the central storyline holds true, then that storyline is going to sound a little bit different. Again, based on those variables about the messenger, the platform, the touch point, etc. Um, yeah.
That's awesome. That's right. I completely agree. Like, cohesion is the way to move forward with the brand. If 5 people are talking about the same brand in 5 different ways, just imagine you're in a trade show. You brought your best 5 folks. You're standing there. There's a guy called Chris and Aviral, and we go to person A, B, C, D, and E, and everyone has a different story.
Mm,
I'm confused now. Like,
yeah.
what are you guys doing? And I don't want to work with you, to be honest.
Yes.
No
That's
one
right.
talks about it, but this is super important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's I worked with a B2B SaaS brand recently, and they were the owners of their category. They kind of pioneered and created their own category, and they blew up huge. $30 million in annual revenue, I think. I forget the user numbers. I mean, they dominated the space. And then they kind of fell asleep a little bit at the wheel. And other little competitors kind of coming up and owning little chunks their space. And then they came to me one day and were like, we need some help. We've got to retake ownership of this category. Like, how have we let this slip away? We're not sure, but we need your help. We did our due diligence. We, we refined their message, refreshed their brand, new brand playbook, new storyline. And, now they're set to dominate again. But what was interesting about that sort of problem state when I first encountered them and started the due diligence, was what I recognized is that this, B2B is it's a sales cycle that involves conversations, right? This is a high ticket enterprise package. So, it's not something that's, $5 a month, easy to click the button. This is a high price point. And so, it's a consultative sales process. And the salespeople were all saying different things. John thought the one piece of the product was the most important, and he would just talk about that a lot. And Mike thought a different piece was really important. He'd talk about that a lot. And they had some success, but all of them were being limited by the fact that they weren't telling the same story. And this, obviously the story they were telling has to be carefully cultivated based on this, deep due diligence that I've been referring to. So, yeah, I mean, everybody has to be telling the same story and then making it their own. Right? It's not about changing the storyline. It's about adding a little bit of personal flavor based on your point of view, your experience, and then, of course, the subsegment of your audience that you're talking to. If you're on a phone call with a prospect, there's a version of that story that they need to hear. It doesn't change the storyline itself. It just sort of enhances it a little bit specific to the set of circumstances.
That's right. I completely agree. And maybe in the next episode, we should definitely record about maybe some sample cases and maybe some educational content that can actually help these brands grow. Because for us also, I think educational stuff and topics grow very well. But what do you think about this first episode? Like, I'm super content and happy, and we didn't have to actually make a structure or anything. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think, we'll have to look at some of the technical stuff. I think the positioning of my camera probably needs to change, because I've noticed that if I look at my screen, I'm not looking at the camera. If I'm looking at the camera, I'm kind of looking up. So that's just me talking to you. We'll cut this out, obviously. But I don't know. Maybe let's come up with in the next couple of minutes, let's just do a little closing bit that we could clip in, in terms of closing it out and talking about what we might do next. You actually said some nice stuff there around educational content. I mean, I think what I definitely want to do is, actually, I'm going to pull this up real quick. I had shared this earlier today. We were sharing like crazy today on the team. So you may not have gotten to it, but there's this guy named Greg Eisenberg, really successful entrepreneur that usually doesn't. So I just saw a Slack message come through.
Oh, that was me. You can ignore that. It's just
okay.
Yeah, you can ignore that. That's not anything relevant right now.
So Greg Eisenberg, serial entrepreneur, super successful. I believe part of his story is he's intentionally never taken VC money, but he's got this idea of a content flywheel, which is very similar to what I've been calling my creative flywheel for a long time. Now, mine incorporates AI, and it's kind of a little bigger around the production process, and his is more for founders. It kind of stitches together a lot of the stuff we were talking about today. But there's this part of it called 5 things founders should copy. And the number one thing is give away the playbook. And that's exactly what I want to do over the course of this series of content that we're working on. I want to give away the storyline methodology, the playbook, if you will. And the theory behind this is that frameworks equal future buyers. So, if we let people understand, we give them the opportunity to do it on their own. Great. Go ahead and do it on your own. By the way, if you don't want to do that, or you don't have the resources, or you feel like it's over your head, or whatever it is, you don't have the bandwidth, we're happy to, to help you out.
That's what Cristiano Ronaldo says, right? I'm sorry to interrupt here, but then this is the craziest thing. Cristiano Ronaldo says this in his podcast. He has just done one podcast, I believe, and he says, I'm going to give you my playbook of how I became the CR7. And if you have the thing, you can do it and win. And show me when you can become CR7. Here's the playbook. So for sure, I completely agree. Giving away the playbook is the biggest and the best thing, because it's all about execution at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting because it ties back to some of the stuff we were talking about earlier around sort of the way that brands used to show up versus now. Everything was so hyper polished, and the idea of giving away your secret sauce was like anathema. Like nobody, they look at you like you were crazy. Everybody was always worried about your idea getting stolen. That was big in Silicon Valley too in the like 2010s.
Yeah.
Like people were really worried about giving away their startup idea over coffee or something because they were afraid somebody was going to steal it. But it feels like along with this vulnerability build in public pivot that we're seeing and witnessing unfolding every day, give away the playbook. Like, why not? Just, if somebody else wants to do it on their own, fine. But ultimately, you got to have the confidence in your own abilities, as the creator of the playbook, that ultimately you're the one who can execute upon it best. And that ultimately, if that playbook has value, there's going to be plenty of prospects and clients and customers out there that are going to want you to do that for them.
I completely agree, and that's right. And maybe, we should actually, in the next one, we should actually have all this content planned and just give away freebies, first freebie, second freebie, fourth freebie. All these clients that we have worked with, let's just give away all the secret sauce that we have. And I think that's how we can help this world become a better place at the end of the day.
Sure. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
All right, great.